Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Rick Roll. Alright, so last day of my short week. I go back to work tomorrow. Hopefully I'm going to get some information this week about my promotion. Fingers crossed. But before we do that, I went over to the pool place today and I got a new filter housing, and I also got my pool vacuum back. So I want to get those both going today. Now, first thing I got to do is transfer all the sand from the existing pump, from the existing filter housing over to the new one. And before I do that, I'm gonna have to actually move it into a bucket, because apparently there's a little screw at the bottom of the existing filter housing that I need to remove and put in the new one. So we're gonna start off by bailing all the sand out of the old filter housing, get it all taken apart so I can pull that screw out. And once again, that means isolating the filter and the pump. So I'm going to turn off the pump, and we're going to close the valves here so that when I take everything apart, the water doesn't all leak out, because we don't want that happening. That would be a big mess. And now we can start taking this thing apart and draining it, getting the sand out of it, and go from there. So just like before, the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the three hoses. This is the hose that comes from the pump, this is the return back to the pool, and this is the drain that goes to, that drains it out of the pump if I want to drain the pool or any of that stuff. Alright, next thing I got to do is get a lot of the water out of here, because if I'm going to get at the sand below the surface, I'm going to have to get the water out. Now, I'm going to actually use this little siphon tool that I made to drain the water out of the pool when I had the pool cover on. Basically, you just kind of fill it up with water, you open up the valve, and out comes the water. Pretty slick, huh? That should only take a minute. Now I got some Home Depot buckets out, because I'm actually going to scoop all the sand into the buckets here, because you know, even though with most of the water has been drained out of here, this thing still weighs about 300 pounds when it's filled with sand. So I got to get that out of here so I can move the housing out of the way, probably move it into the garage, do the switch over in the garage, put the sand back into the new housing, reattach everything, and get everything going again. And so, like I said, I'm going to scoop this all out. Now, I've got all these Home Depot buckets that I've bought over the years, and the truth is, I've been kind of keeping these for specific purposes. I don't usually put like dirt in them. You know, I don't know, you can maybe quibble a little bit about whether sand is dirt, but dirt has a tendency to stay in the inside of the bucket where the sand will rinse right out. And that's important. We want to keep the sand clean, because the sand is the filtration material, and if you get it dirty, then you're just you know, filtering your pool with dirt, and that doesn't have quite the desired effect. So I rinsed all the buckets out, they're good to go. Now we're going to start scooping the sand into them. Okay, so I've moved it into the garage because it's a little cooler in here, in part because I have the kitchen door open and I'm blowing cool air from the house into the garage, and then I also have the door going into the back hallway open, so we get a little bit of circulation through here. And I probably dropped the temperature in here about 20 degrees. It's actually comfortable in here. So we're going to do this part of it in the garage, because hey, why not, right? So this is the empty drum that I'm about to replace, and this part needs to come out. That and all the mechanism on the bottom, because you can see it's a little bit different down on that one. So this has to all come out. And basically there's just a nut on the bottom that holds the whole thing in place. So I'm going to remove that nut, and let's just go pull the inner piece out. They actually gave me another gasket that comes with it, because they're going to say I'm going to probably need a new gasket when I replace the drum housing. So I'm just going to use a little socket wrench, and we're going to pull that out, and that should cause this whole thing in here to come out really easy. It should just pull right out. So let's get going on that. So that piece came out pretty easy once I removed the bolt, and it's a good thing they included a new O-ring, because yeah, that one's pretty trashed. I also noticed when I pulled it out that they had put a little bit of a silicone adhesive on there, a little sealant on there, and I think that's not necessarily a bad idea. So I've got some silicone sealant also. I'm going to, when I reattach this part to the new drum housing, I'm going to not only use the gasket they included and the nut that they included, I'm also going to replace the, we're going to seal it up with a silicone sealant. It couldn't hurt, right? Okay, like I said, I'm just going to put a little silicone glue in there too. Just get it all the way around the washer in there. Make sure we're nice and secure in there. Got a little bit more than I need right now, but we'll wipe off the excess once we get it all clamped down. It's most important just to make sure we have it all filling in all the gaps there. Alright, got that nice and sealed. Let's get rid of any of the excess silicone that's in there. And that should do it for us. Alright, next step is to do a little modification. And I want to do a little modification to this, and let me explain to you what that is. Okay, this is a little drain valve at the bottom of the housing. It allows you to open up the drain valve and drain the water out of here. And I actually noticed there's a little filter in there to keep the sand from coming out. I don't think the old one had that, or if it did, it came out a long time ago. But what I've discovered with the cap that's on top of this thing, that if you open it just a little bit to get the water out, you end up getting sand in the threads of the screw, and then you can't get it to crimp down very well, and it ends up leaking a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put a little ball valve on the end of this thing, and then we'll put the cap on the end of the ball valve. That way, if I need to drain the thing, I can pull the cap off, open the ball valve, drain it out, wash all the threads off, put the cap back on there, and not have the problem. I think that's a simple modification that will make this a little easier to handle in the future. Plus, it'll also give a little bit of time when I'm going over to Home Depot to get this thing to seal up and make sure that we're not going to have any leaks in the bottom. So I'm going to run off to Home Depot. We'll use this thing as an example. We'll see if we can find a ball valve that will work on this thread. And I'm hoping that this is a relatively normal thread, not something unusual. You never can tell with stuff like this. You'd hope that they do regular normal stuff, so you can make minor modifications and stuff like that, but you never know. So I'm back from Home Depot. I couldn't find exactly what I needed. This was exactly the piece I was looking for. Fortunately, the thread on the filter housing is a very common 1-inch thread, so it was very easy to find that to work. But I wanted just kind of a union piece that would go from the output of the ball valve to this piece. I couldn't find that, but I found a couple of pieces that I could put together and make it work. So I've attached this to the bottom of the drum, and a lot of silicone tape on there to make sure it stays watertight. I was a little bit concerned about the gaps in the thread here, so hopefully a lot of silicone tape there will make this not leak. I'm going to bring this back out in the backyard now. We're going to set it up on the stand, and we're going to fill it with water and make sure it doesn't leak. So I got the whole thing filled up with water now, and I don't see any evidence of leaking right now, which means I got a good seal here. I'm going to let it just sit for a little bit just to make sure there isn't a leak in that little area where I drove the screw through on the bottom with the silicone glue and that gasket, the thing that holds the entire filter mechanism inside together. So we're going to let that sit for a little while. I also got the pool vac back, so I want to get that thing in the pool and get it going. I also topped off the pool and overflowed it a little bit, but that's okay because when I get the filter running again, I'm going to backwash it and run some of it out to the yard, so that'll lower the level a little bit. But like I said, I've been losing a lot of water because of the leak in the filter housing, so that should solve this problem. So like I said, we're going to let that sit for a little while and make sure we don't have a leak. We'll put the sand back in there, get it all buttoned up, but for now I want to get the vacuum in the pool and start dealing with some of this mess. Alright, well that's encouraging. The vacuum seems to be working again. It's amazing what a new motor will do. Yeah, apparently that was what the problem was. The motor went out now. I don't know exactly what happened or what they had to do to fix it, but they did manage to fix it, and it does seem to be vacuuming up pretty well now. So I'm gonna let it do its thing. We'll probably run a couple cycles because it's been a while since we've gotten in here and done any vacuuming in here, but right now it does seem to be doing its job, so I'm gonna let it do that. Okay, some time has gone by. I don't see any evidence whatsoever of leakage going on here, so I think this thing's pretty secure. I'm not having any problems. So what I'm going to do is I got to drain most of the water out of this, because if I leave the water in there and then put sand in, it's going to overflow. So I'm going to open up the valve and we're just going to let the water drain out of here, at least most of it. So I got all the sand back in there and a little bit of the water in there. You can see the water looks pretty nasty. So when I first turn it on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter to waste, and that'll flush all that gunk out. And that will also drop down the water level here a little bit so that we're not quite overflowing anymore. But before I do that, I got a new O-ring to put on here and a little bit of silicone sealant to make sure it doesn't leak. And then we're going to button this whole thing up and get it running again. Okay, so this thing's all put back together. First thing I want to do is I want to get all that gunky water out of there. So I'm going to put it into a filter to waste mode, and what that'll do is it'll take everything, it'll go through the filter and then dump out into my waste valve here, and that will help a lot get rid of that gunk. This is also going to verify whether we have any leaks in here. And that's obviously something I'll be watching. Oh yeah, look at the gross water coming out of there. But that should only take about a minute or so to flush out. It's already looking pretty good. So we're going to let that run for a minute or two. That serves an added purpose also. What we're doing is also lowering the water level here, and I'm going to probably just let it run for a couple minutes until the water stops overflowing here and we get down to a lower level. But I think that's going to be in good shape, and holy cow, look at this pool. It already looks a lot better. Almost ready to go swimming in it, doesn't it? That's only after about 45 minutes with the vacuum going. Yeah, it's nice when that works. So I'm going to let that drain for a little bit until we've absolutely stopped it from overflowing, and I think this project's about done. So I saw a little bit of water accumulating here, so we had a little bit of a leak there, but I just tightened up that clamp a little bit and that seems to have fixed it. And now we've lowered the water level significantly, that it isn't overflowing anymore. So at this point I'm going to stop the pump briefly. We're going to switch it back into normal filter mode, and I think we're pretty much done. It's interesting, when I put it back into normal filter mode, I had ended up with a bunch of air getting sucked back into the airline, and that sucked back into the pump, and for a minute it took it a little time to prime the pump again, and then when it did, all of a sudden it blew a bunch of air bubbles out of here. I guess I forgot about that. When I opened up the return line, I laid it down on the ground, all the water ran out, and so the second I flipped it back into normal pump mode, it backwashed back into the filter and ultimately into the pump. Yeah, that's just one of those things you have to deal with. Fortunately, it's a problem that solved itself. Alright, now invariably when I do one of these swimming pool vlogs, I have a bunch of people post in the comments that they think this thing's just too much work, you gotta get rid of the pool and just expand the garden or something like that. I'll tell you right now, that's not gonna happen. I enjoy having this thing too much, and the truth is there's a lot of people out there that have swimming pools that pay an awful lot of money to have somebody else do things they can do themselves. And since this is sort of a DIY vlog, I kind of like being able to show people how to do these things and do them right. So for the time being, I could see maybe at some point in the future I might get rid of this thing, but for now I enjoy having it too much and it's going to stay. So anyway, I think that's all that I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.